This is WealthBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
What comes to mind when you hear the words legacy planning? Chances are you think it's the process of dividing and handing over assets and wealth to your loved ones. And that's not wrong, of course. But the word legacy itself means more than just money and property. So here's a big question to ask yourself. What do you want to be remembered for among your children and children's children? That may seem like a remote question. Important, yes, but not urgent. Still, whatever your age, I think it's never too late to think about this. Welcome to WealthBT. I'm your host, Genevieve Cua, Wealth Editor of the Business Times. Every week, my colleagues and I break down a business story that matters. My guest in this episode is Christopher Tan, Chief Executive of financial planning firm Providend. Thanks for dropping in, Chris.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive in. My main premise here is that legacy planning is more than just the process of distributing wealth. You've written on this as well. How does one start to approach this, and what are the most important elements to address?
You know, Jen, in my world of wealth management, when we talk about legacy planning, it is either distributing wealth via instruments of will or trust, or about buying a universal life policy. But as you have mentioned, legacy is more than just assets left behind. True legacy planning is about the impact you make on your loved ones, your community, people around you. Because without this, you are simply leaving behind assets. That's not really legacy planning, that's estate planning. So I think it starts with first deciding what you want people to remember you for, your beliefs and the values that you wish to perpetuate. Then you plan how you're going to live them out on a daily basis. Because it's an irony that you can have a legal document documenting the values you want to leave behind, but on a daily basis, your children see you living life very differently. And then when it comes to wealth planning, we ask who are the beneficiaries, what are the assets and liabilities that we have, and as a result, what problems will it create, and how are you going to enable your beliefs and values via financial or legal instruments, only if necessary. How are you going to give one lump sum or staggered? How are you going to best communicate your intentions? Are you going to only do it after you passed on? Or if you have a plan, maybe you should do it even when you are alive. So you can see that actually there's quite a bit to think about.
Sounds like a pretty complicated process, huh?
Yeah, but like I said, in my world, it is often reduced to legal instrument or buying of an insurance policy, which is really not legacy planning.
In fact, you've said to me, and you've written about this, you start with the question, what does wealth mean to you?
That's right.
Why is it important to address and articulate this?
So I think for a person who is wealthy, working out the meaning of wealth is essential because it provides the foundation for how that wealth will be used. Without clarity on what wealth means to them personally, a wealth owner risks being reactive rather than intentional, drifting into decisions shaped more by external pressures, fear, or habit rather than by their own values and goals. I mean, there's a saying that, wealth, it doesn't pass through 3 generations. Usually it's not because of poor financial planning, but because their heirs didn't inherit wealth with a sense of purpose with the wealth that they have. So I think when we work out the meaning of wealth, it helps to build family harmony and legacy and promotes emotional and psychological well-being.
This kind of question is very open-ended, and it's not something someone can just answer on the spot, isn't it? It may take a few sessions.
Yeah, so in my work with clients, it takes sometimes 2 sessions or 3 sessions in order for the client to even know exactly the meaning of wealth. Because if you ask someone, what does wealth means to you? I mean, they will probably tell you they don't know. So the process, firstly, will include reflection on life values. So we ask them some big questions like, what are your non-negotiable life goals? What kind of life do you want to live? What does success look like beyond money? Once we know the client's life values, we try and help them translate into a strategy. Investing, estate planning, philanthropy, budgeting, and all that.
Chris, you write a regular column for Business Times. It's called Money Wisdom. And recently you wrote about legacy planning and a letter of wishes. What is this and where does this fit in?
The letter of wishes adds personal context and guidance. Legal documents are often very formal, very cold by design. A will or trust might state what should happen, but it rarely explains why. So a letter of wishes can articulate the reason behind certain bequests or exclusions, the values you hope your heirs would live by, the spirit in which your wealth should be used. Another purpose of the letter of wishes is that it guides trustees and executors in discretionary decisions, especially if you have established a discretionary trust. A discretionary trust allows the trustee to distribute funds in the way they deem best. But the trustee needs guidance, especially when you are no longer around. So a letter of wishes can guide them on what kind of support you intended to give to your beneficiaries. It helps to avoid misinterpretation or misuse. And I think what is most important about the letter of wishes is that it helps future generations, your beneficiaries, understand you better. So you can use the letter of wishes to share how you build your wealth, certain life lessons that you want to pass on, your hopes for your children, your grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. And that's why I often suggest to clients, write your letter of wishes using your own language, your own tone. And imagine when you are gone and your children open up the will and they read the letter of wishes in your voice. I think it's a lot more meaningful.
Still to come, do you worry about your children's attitudes towards wealth and luxury, that they may feel entitled and may in turn pass down such values to their own children? In a moment, we'll talk about some of the biggest mistakes wealthy parents make with their children.
Money Hacks by the Business Times delivers useful financial tips every Monday. Subscribe to the playlists in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. But if watching is your thing, we've got you covered. Subscribe to the Money Hacks playlist in the podcast tab of BT's YouTube channel and watch as Howie Lim gets the inside scoop on the best money hacks. Subscribe and watch today.
And now, back to WealthBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
Welcome back. We often hear stories of the conflicts that arise within families when it comes to inheritance, especially when it comes to parent-child relationships. That money becomes more than just a mark of wealth, but also love. That's where it gets complicated. So, Chris, what are some common mistakes parents make in communicating their values and legacy to children?
Yeah, so this is a very difficult area of family wealth transfer because I often hear of clients who say that I want to give them money and I want to help them, but at the same time, I'm afraid that I will make it too easy. And some of the mistakes really in legacy planning, the first one, I think, out of love or guilt, parents may provide too much, too soon, through the giving, cars, homes, allowances, travel, without requiring meaningful effort or contribution. And over time, this can really create dependency rather than self-reliance, entitlement rather than gratitude, and the inability to face life challenges. Right, so that's one mistake. Another mistake that I often observe is that many parents are reluctant to talk openly about money, fearing that it will cause jealousy, anxiety, or entitlement. So they stay vague. I mean, sometimes after a will is written, I ask the parents, would you want to tell your children how you're going to distribute? And they often say, no, I'm not going to talk about it, right? Because it may create problems. But I often ask them, like, if you're around and you're afraid that it's going to be problematic, imagine you're going to be gone. Another problem would be in the distribution. Parents reward achievement. I've even seen parents dictate in their trust, if you get a bachelor degree in accountancy, you are going to get this sum of money. What if they're interested in the arts? Oh, then they're not going to get that amount, right? So I think sometimes we have certain expectation of our kids and it's not realistic because our children, they're very different from us. So that's another mistake. But the biggest problem I've seen is being inconsistent in modeling values. It's really strange because in their trust, they talk about they want their children to be prudent and all that. But I see them traveling today and they put their young kids really, really young on business class. So it doesn't gel with what they want in their legal document. So these are some of the very common mistakes in doing legacy planning for clients.
Is there a point at which maybe it's too late to model these values because maybe they already have adult children?
I don't think it's too late, but it takes a lot of courage because it first starts with honest, humble dialogue. Admit that you are rethinking some of your past choices. So that's a good start. And then after that, you model it. Now you model it and then you share your own personal financial philosophy going forward. And then when you are doing your legal documents, your wills and trusts, you can create structures that reinforce some of these values. For example, if wealth is held in a trust, you can embed certain decision-making roles for adult children before the wealth is distributed. You can set up what we call value-based disbursement. We can encourage family philanthropy where children actively decide on giving. So some of these things, it's not too late. It can still be done.
You gave the example of rewarding children who pick a course of study that parents like. So how do you draw that line between when you say a value-based activity versus something that you actually feel that this is a good course of endeavor for my kid?
It's very tough, right? So, and usually what we try to, as a professional advisor, we cannot change what the client wants, but we can jolt them into thinking. We'll ask them questions like, what if your children, they are wired differently? Do you really want to reward for results or should you reward for process? What will happen if they study something that you don't like and they don't get the reward? What would be the message that you are sending? Is that the message you want to send to your children? And then they may realize and say, okay, I'm going to change it. That's what we try and do. But well, of course, there are sometimes still parents who are very insistent and we can't change their mind.
I wanted to talk about how parents can prepare their children to inherit wealth responsibly.
First, we always like to emphasize on values. We encourage parents to talk about what money means to them in the family. Is it about freedom, responsibility, opportunity, or giving? It would be great if parents can share their personal journey on how they have earned that wealth, how they make financial decisions, how they make trade-offs, and frame wealth as a tool and not an identity. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, if families have got young children, great. Introduce simple financial habits like saving, budgeting, giving. For teens, let them maybe manage a small budget, track spending, work maybe a job. For young adults, involve them in family financial decisions. Some of my clients are already doing that. And finally, if you have done your estate plan or your legacy plan, I would strongly encourage parents to be open, share with them how you're going to give, clarify with them what will be inherited, why you are giving it that way. All these things will prepare them so that when they finally receive the wealth, it's not a surprise.
And also, I suppose it's a good time to dialogue. If children may be resentful for some reason or other, you can chance to explain, isn't it?
Example I can think of is I've got a client, husband and wife, and they own many properties. And in their mind, they want to give to their two children fairly. But with properties, it's almost impossible to be fair because the values are different. And when you give now, the value may go up differently. And they were so afraid that when that happens, one of them will feel very upset. And so what we did was we brought they're not kids anymore. Actually, they are two adults together and invited the parents to share about that concern. And it was very interesting because in that conversation, both of the adult children told their parents, Dad, Mom, why would we feel that you have been unfair? They don't belong to us anyway. These properties, they don't belong to us anyway. I'm not going to fight with my brother just because he got $500,000 more. Right? And so that gave a lot of assurance to the parents. But most importantly, the two adult children knew exactly the reason behind why the properties were distributed that way.
Thanks for dropping in, Chris, and sharing all your insights.
Thank you.
Legacy planning is about passing on wealth. But more than that, I believe it's also about the gift of your family values and ethos that you wish to pass to future generations. Ultimately, wealth may come and go, sometimes because of factors not in anyone's control. But a non-financial legacy of values like integrity, family togetherness, and prudence makes a lasting gift that builds character for generations. And I hope this episode helps you to rethink your values and the legacy that you wish to pass on to your children. BT Correspondence will be back next week with a new episode on transport, so do check it out. I'm Genevieve Cua. Until the next time, thank you for listening.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts. Or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.